All right, it looks like we're plugged in, ready to go. Everything is all set for the Panther-Lair Show here on a Wednesday night. We changed it up. We've now moved the Panther-Lair Show to Wednesday nights, at least for the month of August. This is the plan here, and I apologize. I should have made more about this or said more about this, talked more about it, maybe on last week's podcast or tweeted about it or something like that. But I decided to move it just for the month of August for a variety of reasons. You know, how schedules go. We've always done Tuesday nights, but just as I looked at the month of August, it just seemed like Tuesday night wasn't going to work. So for the live streams here this month, we're going to be going on Wednesday nights. It'll still be 8:30 to 9:30. We'll still kind of have the same system, same setup with the live stream and then releasing the audio podcast the next day. In this case, it'll come out on Thursdays. But yeah, I apologize for not giving a heads up on Tuesday night, letting people know. I actually got some messages. People say, "Hey, where's the podcast?" I mentioned it on the podcast last week, mentioned it on the live stream last week, but forgot to kind of give an update. I know I had forgotten about it, so it's kind of how it goes. But for the month of August, we're gonna have a Wednesday night live stream, release a podcast on Thursday. So adjust your calendars accordingly. Fortunately, we still got something new for you on Wednesdays, and hopefully you got a chance to check it out, the Pickett Show. And I'm pretty excited about this. I don't know. This is, I know a lot of times at the beginning of these podcasts or the beginning of these live streams, we'll do, there's some, at the beginning of these live streams, there's some promotions, and do some ads and some sponsorships and things like that. This is a promotion here at the beginning of the podcast, but it's a promotion for my own thing. So I feel like it's not quite entirely the same. But, we have the Pickett Show. Just debuted today, Wednesday, August 4th, episode number 1. We had an announcement on Friday, whatever day that was, 4, 3, 2, 1, the 29th or the 30th. We had an announcement that we were starting the Pickett Show, and this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about this. We haven't done anything like this before. Haven't had an opportunity to do anything like this before. Every week, every Wednesday, starting today, August 4th, 2 days before the start of training camp, every Wednesday through training camp and the entire season, like we're taking off the bye week that they have in October. We're not going to have an episode that week. Every other week between now and the end of November, and potentially into December, depending on what the bowl situation looks like or anything like that, you're going to hear from Kenny Pickett, and in an exclusive setting. And this truly is exclusive. He's probably going to do his regular weekly media interviews, and people ask him questions and things like that. But we're going to sit down with him every week, just me and him and you, and we're going to talk to Kenny Pickett about the season, about the last game, about the next game, and about his journey. I mean, he's going through, this is 5th year at Pitt, 4th year as a starting quarterback. He thought his Pitt career was going to be over. He decides to come back for another year. Now let's document it. Let's follow him as he goes through this season, ups and downs. I think we can all agree, good or bad, this season's going to be interesting. Yeah, I don't see this being a boring year. You never know. Anything is possible, but this season is going to be interesting, good or bad. They're either going to do what we think they're all capable of doing, or they're going to fall short of it. And either way, we're going to have a heck of a lot to talk about. And we're going to talk to Kenny about it every week. If you're a Panther-Lair.com subscriber, you have the opportunity to submit questions for, we'll do a little Ask Kenny segment each week. We're asking him a few questions. Then we had some fun with that this week. Asked him about quarterbacks that he kind of looks up to or tries to emulate or tries to play like. Talked about his favorite, or most memorable throw that he made in his Pitt career to date. I thought that was an interesting conversation too. And, just overall, on this first episode, you can go check it out. It's less than 20 minutes. This is not one of our hour-long podcasts or anything like that. You can watch it on the Panther-Lair.com YouTube channel, or you can listen to it in the podcast. We release it through the Panther-Lair.com podcast stream, so you can listen to it there, or you can watch it on the YouTube channel. And for this first episode, we really focused a lot on just the decision to come back. And I know Kenny has talked about it a little bit here and there. He talked about it in the spring. I think he talked to John McGonigal at the Post-Gazette, did a really nice piece on Kenny earlier this summer. I forget when it was, but it was an opportunity to really hear Kenny's side of it again. And he talked about where he was getting drafted, or where he was getting projected to be drafted. And it wasn't what he was comfortable with. It wasn't what he wanted to do. And he talked to people like Peyton Manning, who gave him the advice to go back, get another year, and try and improve that stock. it is not unimportant to consider the fact that he directly said to Pat Narduzzi, if Mark Whipple's not coming back, I'm not coming back. And I don't think it was presented as sort of an ultimatum, but I think it was, in the course of conversation, look, this is important. Kenny Pickett wasn't going to come back to learn a new offense. That would defeat the purpose altogether. And I think that's important. I think it's important that Kenny Pickett was not going to come back to be part of a rebuild in 2021. If he looked at the 2021 Pitt roster and said, those guys are going to struggle to win 5 games because they're rebuilding, he wouldn't have come back. And he says that outright. I ask him a question. I say, this has to reflect some of your confidence in the team. He's like, yeah, I wasn't going to come back to be part of a rebuilding project. I wasn't going to come back to win 3 games or something like that. And so I think there's a lot to dig into there. There's a lot of insight from Kenny, and I hope you got a chance to check it out. I really enjoyed doing it. I'm really looking forward to doing this every week of the season. We've never had this kind of coverage before on Panther-Lair.com. I don't know if anybody's had this kind of coverage before. This is the kind of stuff, you got the Ben Roethlisberger show on the Fan, right? That's the kind of thing that we're doing here. But we're doing it with Kenny Pickett and over sort of a longer period of time, and we're doing it all season long, and I'm really excited about it. I don't want to be too much of a geek about my own content, but I'm really excited about it. I'm looking forward to doing this week by week and getting sort of that, I don't want to say access, but just the insight from Kenny. And I hope you enjoy it too. I hope you like listening to it and watching the videos. And also make sure you subscribe to the Panther-Lair.com YouTube channel to never miss an episode, of this podcast, never miss an episode of the Kenny Pickett Show. Go to Panther-Lair.com on YouTube. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you won't miss anything. You'll always be involved and you'll see everything we've got going on. So go check that out. All right, we got a lot to talk about. Pitt starts training camp this Friday. Is the first practice, August 6th, and so we've got a lot to break down in terms of the team. But there's already questions and comments rolling in, and so I figured we'll just jump into those first, and then we'll hit on some of the topics I want to talk about with the team. Coaster King gets us started, says, not even sure where to begin tonight, so I'll just list a bunch of people we need to talk about. Ryan Baer, Tyrese Fearbry, and MJ Rice to start. Yeah, that's 3 4-star prospects that Coaster King is throwing out at us. And let's just go right in the order. Ryan Baer is an offensive tackle, a 4-star offensive tackle prospect from Ohio. He's announcing his commitment on Thursday. So depending on when you listen to this podcast, obviously if you're watching the live stream here on Wednesday night, we're all on the same page. Depending on when you listen to this podcast, you might listen to it after his commitment announcement. You might listen to it, I don't know when you'll listen to it. You might be right before it. It might be in the middle of the podcast. He might announce his commitment. But Ryan Baer took official visits in June. He went to Virginia. He went to Illinois. He went to Kentucky. He went to Michigan State. And pretty notably, you'll see that, or you might have noted that I didn't mention Pitt because Ryan Baer, this 4-star offensive tackle prospect, number 31 offensive tackle recruit in the class of 2022, didn't take an official visit to Pitt. He took an unofficial visit to Pitt June 15th, and I think that was his only other visit in the month of June, an unofficial visit as opposed to an official visit. And because of that, because of him not taking an official visit to Pitt, I think people have sort of, or generally in the last few weeks or last month or two, people in the recruiting industry have overlooked or underestimated Pitt's chances at landing Ryan Baer. However, from what we've heard, that visit went really, really well, and he was really impressed with what he saw and what he did on that unofficial visit. He wasn't there for a full weekend. He was just there for a day, but he really enjoyed himself and really was impressed with what he saw from Pitt. We've also heard that there's a really strong connection between Baer and his family and the Pitt coaches. A connection that, I don't know if it started the day of that unofficial visit, but it has certainly gotten stronger since then, and it's been maintained since then. As we head into Thursday, when Ryan Baer is going to announce his commitment, and this is a guy with 20 offers, like I say, a 4-star offensive tackle prospect, everybody likes those, I think there's a really good chance. I think Pitt has a really good chance of landing his commitment. And it would be a huge one, first 4-star prospect in the class, and obviously one at at a position that you would want to have at offensive tackle. So keep an eye on that one. That's going to be interesting to watch. That's obviously a big commitment for, if Pitt could land him, it would be a big commitment. And we'll see what happens on Thursday. Tyrese Fearbry, the other one, I guess, did this happen? He decommitted from Penn State. I mean, we'll just say that. I forgot what date he decommitted. The 29th. What day was that? I forget even. Let me look at a calendar and see if... So that was July 29th. Oh, it was last Thursday. Okay, so that did happen since our last podcast. Last Tuesday night was the 27th. 2 days later, Tyrese Fearbry decommitted from Penn State about 3 weeks, between 3 to 4 weeks after he had committed to the Nittany Lions, which he did on the 4th of July. And I don't know, I wrote a few things about this in the 321 column on Panther-Lair.com on Friday. First of all, when Tyrese Fearbry, the 4-star defensive end from Perry, when he committed to Penn State, I said right off the bat, I said Pitt's not going to back out of this thing. They're not going to stop recruiting Tyrese Fearbry. They're not going to just walk away from the situation. They're going to be in on it because they put a lot of time into him. They recruited him really hard. Probably did more to recruit him than any other school. I would imagine, just based on things that I've heard. And so they weren't going to stop recruiting him. And I thought there was a decent chance that Tyrese Fearbry could end up on the open market again, that he might end up looking for a new school to go to for whatever reason. And part of it is Penn State has recruited really well this year. I mean, their class is, I think at one point they were number 1 in the country. I don't know if they're still number 1. They might have dropped. I don't know. But they've got a bunch of really highly rated recruits, including a whole lot of 4-star prospects, and some of those 4-star prospects are also defensive ends like Tyrese Fearbry is, and they have a 5-star defensive end. This is a loaded recruiting class, and it's a loaded defensive end class. Now, I don't think necessarily that Tyrese Fearbry was running away from that, but I do think it's possible that when you're in that kind of situation, you can feel like maybe you got lost in the shuffle a little bit. There was 1 or 2 4-star defensive ends that were committed before Tyrese Fearbry. He was either the 2nd or 3rd. And then they've gotten a couple more since then, including a 5-star. When you're only, one of 2 4-star prospects at your position in the class, the situation could be different than when you're one of 4, and there's also a 5-star also at your position. It could be a different kind of situation. Your recruitment can feel a little bit different, and you can feel maybe like you're a little bit lost in the shuffle, and maybe you want to take another look at things and make sure you made the right decision. And it seems like that's what Tyrese Fearbry has decided to do. He's been around Pitt. There was an opportunity for recruits to visit schools last week. It was a recruiting quiet period where recruits can go on campus and visit with the colleges. They can't have in-person contact off campus, but they can go to campuses and visit. And so recruits were able to do that last week. I think Tyrese Fearbry was around Pitt maybe more than once. And right around the time when he decommitted. Now, I don't know if I don't know if the Pitt coaches talked him into decommitting. I don't know if they expected him to decommit this soon, but I think they thought they would still have a shot at it as time went on. And now they do. Where is Tyrese Fearbry going to end up? I have no idea. It would not surprise me at all if he ends up back at Penn State, even though that's kind of a rarity that sort of thing happens, that a guy decommits from a school and then ends up going back to that school. It would not surprise me at all if he ended up doing that, though. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he ended up going to Pitt. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he ended up going to Auburn or Kentucky, the other schools that he took official visits to in June. I don't really know where Tyrese Fearbry is going to go right now. I think, throughout the month of June, there was a pretty strong feeling that he was going to Pitt, and I don't think that was a false feeling. I think even Fearbry felt like he was going to Pitt. But obviously things changed over, the last 2 weeks of June, and they've changed again here throughout the month of July. So we'll keep an eye on that, but it definitely is going to be interesting to watch. And then the third name Coaster King mentioned, MJ Rice, and this is on the basketball side, a 4-star small forward prospect out of California. He's number 28 prospect in the nation, the number 8 small forward recruit in the country. And as we sit here on Wednesday night around 8:45, he's in Pittsburgh right now for an official visit, wrapping up an official visit. I think he'll be here until tomorrow, and then he'll head home. But this is, a huge prospect for Pitt. I mean, like, I don't think you can overstate how significant this is. A guy like MJ Rice, a top 30 recruit in the class, being on campus, and the possibility of adding a guy like MJ Rice to go with Judah Mintz, who's already committed and was one of the breakout stars this summer. He committed to Pitt as a 4-star prospect and had a huge summer on the AAU circuit. Just killed it and raised his profile. You put those two guys together in a class, you got a real solid group of some stars. Now, it's not going to be easy with a guy like MJ Rice. A guy like MJ Rice is going to have options. He's going to have Kansas coming after him. It seems like NC State is pretty prominent in his recruitment. I've heard Oklahoma State might be involved as well. And then you're always going to, with guys of this caliber, you're going to be recruiting against the prospect of growing pro. There are options out there for guys coming out of high school who want to skip over college and get paid right away. And you're going to recruit against that. And more, you're going to be recruiting against that. Every year, it's going to get more intense and more of a challenge to recruit against that draw of going and playing professionally for a year or two and then going to the NBA. So MJ Rice is going to be considering all those options, but he definitely has Pitt in the mix, I guess is what I would say. When you take an official visit like this, it's obviously it's significant. He took an official visit to Kansas in June. Now he's got this visit to Pitt here this week. And then, like I say, I think Oklahoma State, he went out there and visited in June. I don't think it was an official visit, but these are some of the schools that he's keeping an eye on and checking out. Pitt seems to be prominent in that group. So that would be a huge one as well. So 3 4-star prospects. Man, Coaster King, you got to start it right off with talking about some big-time recruits on football and basketball. And that's quite a start to the show. Let's see here. RJ Seaman 38 jumped in as a whatchamacallit? Jumped in as a super chatter. Excuse me. Sorry, I was trying to look through. He jumped in as a super chatter, contributed to the podcast. We really appreciate that. It's a good way to get your questions answered. And I'm trying to see if you had some comments here. You usually have something to say, RGC, man. Oh, he says, week 2, we will know what Kenny Pickett and Mark Whipple are brewing. Pure and simple, no BS. It all comes down to blowing out Tennessee. I don't know about a blowout. You got to get a win. I think you'd like to go through as many of those non-conference games as possible and getting comfortable wins, winning by a few touchdowns. But the first step is to finish with more points than the other guy. That's really what it's going to come down to. That was an idiotic thing to say. That's what it's going to come down to, is getting more points than the other guy. No, it's going to come down to the offense for this team. And as we start talking about storylines for Pitt entering training camp, we start talking about things that the team is going to, be focused on, things that the team needs to do, things that, the team, the main points of focus, the number one, the top goals for this team. You got to get the offense better. And we've talked about it all off season. We talked about it throughout last season. You've got to get the offense better. And if you don't, it's going to be a year that looks like 2020. It's going to be a year that looks like 2019. And if you do get the offense better, I don't know. Maybe it's a year that looks like 2009 in terms of total wins. Pushing that envelope, 9-10 wins in the regular season. That's the potential that this team has with the talent they've got, the roster returning, and the schedule the way it's set up. They've got the potential to win 9-10 games if they can get the offense figured out. If the offense can go out there and put up points is really what it comes down to. And so I think you'd like to see them come out against UMass and Tennessee and Western Michigan and New Hampshire and just pile up the points. You know what I mean? Just really pour it on. That's what you'd like to see. That would be the ideal scenario. But step 1 is you got to win. And that's what that's what's most important. Doug Woods says, if after all the realignment is over, if Pitt ended up in some version of the stripped-down ACC or AAC, do you see them as more of a Cincinnati-type team or more like Connecticut? Well, I mean, between those two, they're more like Cincinnati. I mean, I think if you ended up with Pitt playing at a lower level, I think they would have more success. I think they would have success closer along the lines of what Cincinnati has been able to do in the ACC. I mean, UConn is not a comparison you would make to Pitt. No matter how many self-loathing jokes that Pitt fans want to make, you're talking about Connecticut was a program that was started in 2000 or something like that. I mean, they weren't, or maybe they made the jump to whatever level you want to call it, FBS or D1, I guess is what it would have been called. And the program never had any support. And we talk about Pitt fans or whether the administration supports Pitt. Pitt's support compared to Connecticut is like comparing Alabama to Pitt. You know what I mean? There was never any support for the Connecticut football program. Even when they were achieving, even when they were having success, there was never any support for that program. There was never really any desire for it to do well outside of like the coaches and the players. I mean, you read things about that Connecticut football program. I mean, I think in the last couple of years, I remember reading something on ESPN.com that was basically someone saying like, why does this program even still exist? Why don't they just gut it? You know, I can remember in 2015, Pitt was going out to play Akron, and I had a guy. This was on an old incarnation, a different online radio show that I did. And I had a guy that covered Akron on the show as a guest, and we're previewing Akron. And before we kind of got into the X's and O's or player this or player that, we talked about the program. And just as we were talking, it got to a point where I asked him, and sort of legitimately, in the course of the conversation of like, should Akron consider either dropping down a level or contracting the program altogether? I mean, because it wasn't making money, it wasn't drawing fans, they weren't having success. There was no point in that program. If somehow everything shook out in the next 20 years and Pitt ended up in the AAC, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's highly unlikely. I would say 95%, and I only leave that extra 5% because I just know anything is possible. But if Pitt somehow ended up in a league like that, they wouldn't suffer that fate. I think they would actually find ways to succeed. I think they'd still be able to, obviously they would lose revenue with TV deals and things like that, but I think they would find ways to succeed more along the lines of Cincinnati than Connecticut. I don't know if that's a great, I don't know if it's a great comparison to talk about Cincinnati and Connecticut. Let's see here. RJC Man 38 says, I would like to talk about Kenny, what we have seen, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, from Kenny Pickett, look, I think we've all seen him for 4 years now. I think we know what he does well. I think we know where he struggles. I think, he could put a little more touch on his passes. I think he could lead his receivers a little bit better. I do think at some point over the last couple of years, he got, I don't want to say jumpy in the pocket, but I think his pocket presence could improve. I think he felt pressure sometimes that wasn't there. I think there were points, and I don't know if any of us would blame him. I mean, we certainly criticized it enough that there were points where he didn't necessarily trust his offensive line. And he may not say that, but when you watch how he would scramble or pull the ball down and just move around when he maybe didn't need to yet because the protection actually was holding up for another second or two. I think he needs to improve in that area. I think he does have a strong enough arm to get the ball downfield for long passes. He's obviously got good mobility. He can run and he can make plays with his legs and he can keep plays alive with his legs. I think he's the kind of guy that you would want leading a 2-minute drill, and he's done it. He's done it a bunch of times. Led those fourth quarter comeback wins. He is a gamer. He's a tough guy. I think the other players on the team have respect for him because he's gotten knocked around quite a bit over the course of his career, and I think they respect him for battling. Because he is a battler out there. He'll go out and I don't like using war metaphors. I don't want to say he's a warrior. He'll go to war out there. He's a soldier for this U. None of that kind of stuff. But he's going to go out and battle on the football field, and I think he's a good leader in that regard. And I think he's had some natural leadership since he got to Pitt. But there are areas where he needs to improve, physical areas where he needs to improve. And I think there are things that he is capable of. He does need to improve it. He can get a little bit better. No question. Josh Newark says, Kenny interview. He was very introspective and self-aware. Looking forward to more interviews. Me too. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be fun to hear from Kenny every week. And there may be weeks where he doesn't want to talk to us. But He's going to, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what he has to say. Let's see. Beagle Panthers jumping in, wants us to free him. That's probably not going to happen if he keeps jumping into the comments all these different times. Brock Madonic says, a little off topic, I'm a Knicks fan, and since Kemba Walker signed today, all I've been seeing is the shot he hit against Pitt in Madison Square Garden. Yeah, there's nothing to you can't get away with it. You can't get away from that. I feel like that shot of Kemba Walker putting Gary McGee on the ground shows up on Twitter at least once a week, if not more often. It's basically anytime somebody mentions Kemba Walker, they show that clip. And you feel bad for Gary. It was an unfortunate switch. They couldn't get back. Brad Wanamaker was supposed to be the guy on Kemba. UConn got a switch out of Pitt's defense, and Gary ended up on him. And that was just a poor matchup. It was not one that favored Pitt. Let's see here. Scrolling down through, Royce Beacom, it says, it's interesting that Mark Whipple was the gatekeeper to determine if Kenny Pickett would go or stay. Look, I think going through the season, right, as we got near the end of the season, obviously there's a growing sentiment among the Pitt fans that they wanted to change at offensive coordinator. There's part of me that believes it was headed in that direction. There's part of me that believes that Pat Narduzzi was headed toward changing coordinators. I don't know if he changed his mind exclusively because Kenny Pickett said he wanted to come back with Mark Whipple, but I do think it was a factor. And I think there's a wager you make there, right? If you believe Whipple is good enough to lead your offense, you keep Whipple in place. If you believe Whipple is not good enough to lead your offense, you drop him. If you're back and forth on him, you start looking for other factors. If you sit down and say, well, I like this about it, I don't like this about it, about the job he's done, I think you look for other factors. What's going to, you list your pros and cons. What's going to tip the balance here? What's going to tip the scale? And if the thing that tips the scale is the potential to have a four-year starter at quarterback coming back, you know what I mean, a fifth-year senior quarterback, as opposed to breaking in a brand new guy when you haven't been blown away with what you've seen from them, maybe that tips the scales a little bit. Maybe that's just enough to do it. Right or wrong. Now, I don't know if that necessarily means Mark Whipple's around for the next 5 years, but at least for this year, he is. Now, there's more to it, of course, than that. I think, and we talked about this on the message boards back in the fall. And I think Pat Narduzzi has discussed it at times since then, during the offseason, that at a certain point, I think after the Notre Dame game, remember they had that off week after the Notre Dame game, that Pat Narduzzi really kind of sat down and reevaluated the offense and took stock of where things were with the offense and why it was struggling and why it wasn't performing better than it had been. And I think maybe some of the improvements you saw in the subsequent weeks were a result of Narduzzi's sort of renewed interest in the offense. And not that he was ignoring it in the past, but I think sort of the sense that I've gotten is that Narduzzi sat down and said, look, you need to gather all of your information on what we're doing and why we're doing it, and you need to bring it to me. I need to look at this stuff, which is, I think, more than most head coaches would do with either side of the ball on a regular basis. But with the off week, right after a pummeling like they took at against Notre Dame, Narduzzi had an opportunity to do it. And so you have that. You have Narduzzi's input for whatever it was worth over the final few weeks of the season when, for 3 out of the 4 weeks or whatever, the offense was pretty good. Florida State, pretty solid. Virginia Tech, pretty good. Georgia Tech, pretty good. Clemson, not so much. So you have that, plus the, having Pickett back, plus I think some confidence that Narduzzi probably still has at least a little bit left in Mark Whipple, and you end up with Whipple back for, at least another year. We got another super chatter, Tony Sadaka. I appreciate you jumping in there and supporting the podcast, Tony. Remember, if you watch this live stream, you enjoy the podcast, we definitely appreciate any support. We really do these live streams just kind of for fun. on Tuesday nights, now Wednesday nights. So anybody who wants to support, we definitely appreciate it. Tony asks, will Pitt have a legit running game this year? And that's a $1 million question. And it's a huge one, and it's an important one. And we've talked about this a lot throughout the offseason of what they need to do to improve the running game. And it really is a case of every part of the offense. If you want to sit down and tell me the running backs were the biggest problem, I'd say, okay. If you want to sit down and tell me the offensive line was the biggest problem with the running game, I'd say, okay. If you want to tell me that the tight ends were the biggest part of the problem, Pat Narduzzi brought this up, I think during spring camp. He talked about, there was probably overlooked how much they were held back by the blocking or the poor blocking of the tight ends in the run game. So if you want to tell me the tight ends were the biggest problem, I would say, okay. If you want to tell me, it's harder to make a case for the quarterback and the wide receivers when it comes to the run game. But if you want to tell me those guys, I'd say sure. And if you want to tell me that the coordinator and the game plan are the biggest part of the problem, I'd say okay. I'll take any of those. We will accept any of those answers when it comes to breaking down the issues with Pitt's running game. Because every one of those position groups, every one of those elements, every one of those factors needs to improve in 2021 in order for the run game to get better. I don't think it's impossible for Pitt's offense to improve without an improved run game. I think even if the offense does not improve, I think even if the running game doesn't improve, I think the offense could still take some steps forward. But it's going to get a heck of a lot easier for the offense to get better if the run game is more effective. It makes things so much easier on so many levels. It does so much for you. Just the red zone alone. It vastly improves what you're able to do there. It broadens what you're able to do there over, the options you have available inside the 20. If you're one-dimensional, all you can really do is throw the ball. And that's been the issue the last 2 years, and I think they've been so poor in the red zone the last 2 years, due at least in part to the fact that they were one-dimensional offense. All they could do was throw. They weren't a good running offense. And you look at last year, it's really interesting, and I'm going to write about this month, I think, and it's a topic I'll probably bring up with Kenny. It's a topic that we'll talk to the coaches about because I think it's a huge one. When we get into the red zone offense, we look at the red zone offense. Last year, Kenny Pickett and Nick Patty, two quarterbacks, combined for 8 red zone rushing touchdowns. Okay? No, combined for 10. Excuse me, because Pickett had 8 and Patty had 2. They had 10 rushing touchdowns between the two of them. And they're all in the red zone. Quarterback rushing touchdowns are usually red zone touchdowns. That's what that was. Red zone rushing touchdowns. 10 of them for those two quarterbacks. In 2019, Pitt as a team, a whole team, had 9 rushing touchdowns inside the red zone. There's a lot to dig into there. But I do think that their red zone offense was a little bit better last year because they were able to convert some of those opportunities with the quarterback run. Having that available, having an effective run game, all these things are going to go a long way in turning more of those red zone trips into touchdowns. When the last 2 years, and really the last 3 years, too many of them ended in field goals. Because even in 2018, again, they were a one-dimensional offense. So they weren't a good red zone scoring team. And you can go look at the NCAA site. I go on this rant every now and then. You can look at the NCAA's official stats site, and the NCAA gets it wrong. They get it wrong. If you go look at the NCAA's official stat site and look at red zone offense or red zone defense, they're going to give you a stat of red zone scoring percentage. How often do you get inside the 20? Or what percentage of your trips inside the 20 end in points? And that's a touchdown or a field goal. And they rank the teams based on that. Now, that's a worthwhile stat to consider. Better. It's a worthwhile stat, I think, more so for defense than for offense. But for offenses, sure, it's good. You didn't get pushed out of the 20 or miss a field goal or something like that. But the reality is, if you get into the red zone and settle for a field goal, to some extent, you failed. To some extent, and not even to some extent, to a large extent, you failed as an offense. Because once you get into the red zone, you need to be heading to the end zone. You need to be heading for touchdowns. Settling for a field goal is a failure. And it held back this team last year. And it held back this team in 2019. And to some extent, it held back this team in 2018. When you start to look, and Pitt was pretty bad on scoring percentage overall, like the NCAA's bad stat. When you sort it and break it down by red zone touchdown percentage, the percentage of your red zone possessions that end in touchdowns, or my personal favorite, well, I like red zone touchdown percentage a lot too. But if you also go by points per red zone possession, both of those, I think, tell a more full picture of how you do in the red zone. And Pitt was one of the worst in the country in both of those categories. One of the worst in the country and maybe one of the bottom 1 or 2 in the Power 5. Definitely at the bottom of the ACC. They were awful. They didn't score touchdowns enough in the red zone. And so you've got to get better there. How do you get better there? You have a balanced offense that can run and pass. You can't just be a pass-first offense. Because the problem is, obviously, you get inside the 20, the field shortens up. Now, your pass patterns that go 15 yards downfield are going to be a little bit tougher to run, particularly as you get closer. If you're inside the 10, you can't run those 15-yard routes. You're cutting out huge swaths of your playbook because you can't go downfield because you're only 8 yards from the end zone. You need to be able to run the ball effectively. And that means quarterback run, and it means running back run. And I'm not talking about screen passes. You don't want to throw screen passes. You need to find ways to get the ball into the end zone. And I don't think you can do that effectively and consistently if you're only a one-trick pony. If all you can do is throw the ball. If you don't have balance in your offense. So getting the run game going, Tony, to come back to your question, I don't know if they will. I like the stable of backs that they have. I like Izzy Abanikanda a lot. I talked a lot about him 2 years ago, or last year, I should say, when he was going into his freshman year. I talked him up a lot. You can go back and find those Panther-Lair shows, and I'm doing it again. And I think he showed in the spring game what he's capable of. I think we've seen some flashes from Vincent Davis. And you got A.J. Davis. You got Daniel Carter. You got Todd Sibley. You got all these guys you can kind of mix in. I do think somebody needs to emerge as the number one. And if it's me, to me, Abanikanda is that guy. And they need him to be that guy. They need him to be on the caliber of a 1,000-yard rusher. Whether he gets there or not is, we'll see. Let's see here. Brock McDonough asked a question about the Kenny Pickett show. Will the episodes be longer? No, we're going to shoot for right around 20 minutes or less each week on the Kenny Pickett show. Don't want to take up too much of his time, and I think we can cover the ground that we want to cover. In that amount of time. So we don't want to lose everybody's attention span. Let's see here. Talk is Pitt says, I really hope we win 9 games, but to upset North Carolina, Miami, or Clemson would be great. 8-4 is what I have them. I realistically, and we've talked about this, we've broken down the schedule a lot of times. You can get to 9 wins without beating Carolina, Miami, or Clemson. And it's not. I don't think there are any other crazy upset wins that you would look at to get to 9. The 4 non-conference games, they should be wins, and there's a very good chance to get to a win there. Tennessee being the one I think the most challenging out of it, but those are 4 games that Pitt should be able to win, and then Virginia and Duke and Syracuse and Georgia Tech are 4 games Pitt should be able to win. That means if you're not going to be able to beat Carolina, Miami, or Clemson, you should be able to go to Blacksburg and beat Virginia Tech. You do that, you got 9. But we'll see. You can't have one of those. You can't have a slip up. You can't lose to Georgia Tech. You can't lose to Syracuse. You can't lose to Duke or Virginia. You've got to take care of business in those games, as I keep saying all offseason, to give yourself a chance to turn 8 wins into 9, or 9 wins into 10, or 7 wins into 8, or whatever it is. You've got to take care of business in those other games. Brock McDonough says Penn State fans keep bringing up that Pat Narduzzi burned the bridge with Tyrese Fearbry back when he committed to Penn State. Any belief in that? No, I don't think so. I think when Tyrese Fearbry committed to Penn State, I think Pitt took it in stride and fully intended to continue recruiting him. And, that being the case, they weren't going to burn any bridges. I don't think Pat Narduzzi did that going forward. Or I don't think he did that at that time, and I think that relationship is still probably pretty strong as they move forward. Josh Newark says, I know this was last week's theme, but do you see the NCAA dying regarding their overseeing of FBS and essentially being replaced by the SEC and who they allow into their club, essentially letting the Power 5 schools govern themselves? Well, I mean, there's been there have been moves toward that. Who is that? Josh. Yeah. Josh, there have been moves toward that. I mean, you go back to the Power 5 conferences being granted autonomy that, or further autonomy or some levels of autonomy to kind of make their own rules. And they've progressively moved toward that. And I think some of these things that have happened, if they didn't happen throughout the NCAA, they were still going to happen in those Power 5 conferences. It's the thing you have to remember is the NCAA it's a governing body, but it's a governing body made up of all the bodies it's governing, if that makes any sense. And so in some ways its power is it has power, but that power has weakened as the individual institutions and the conferences have grown stronger over the years. And they've realized that they can kind of operate some of these things on their own. And would it surprise me if 10 years from now the NCAA is replaced by something else that's sort of the concoction of these Power 5 conferences? No, not. Actually, I mean, probably the more likely thing is you'd still have the NCAA in some form to govern eligibility and requirements and things like that, while the schools really kind of run everything else and organize everything else and put everything else together. And I mean, as it's most important, make all the money, right? Or make the bulk of the money. So that's, I think that's where it's headed. And, I think it's been headed that direction for a while. Anthony Tennyson says, Chris, do you think with the players able to get endorsement deals, that'll keep some of the basketball players from going pro because they can get some good deals? Yeah, I mean, Tony, you'd have to check the numbers. You'd have to see what kind of endorsement deals are available through the name, image, likeness stuff for a guy considering college or pro. And you have to see what the contract numbers are like for that guy who's considering going to college or going pro. And if the numbers are heavily weighed one way or the other, you follow the money. I don't know if they're going to be it's tough. I mean, for the vast majority of guys who go to college or considering college, they're not going to be able to get enough in endorsement deals to offset really anything they would get playing pro, I think. But the guys who are good enough to get paid to go pro are probably going to be able to get some pretty good endorsement deals. So I don't know if it would really shift the balance. We talk about tipping the scales earlier. I don't think it would really tip the scales all that much in one kid's decision versus another. I think, there's probably more money in the pro leagues, I would think. And I don't think for the most part the endorsement deals will be enough to offset that. Maybe they come close enough that a kid says, okay, I'll be good with this amount of money and I'll go to college for a year and then go to the NBA. Let's see here. Bart Simpson says Kenny needs to do what he did at Miami in his freshman year. 1, 2, 3, no one's open, then run. Yeah, I think that's part of his game, but I think he also needs to hang in the pocket a little bit better. I think Mark Whipple, whatever you want to say about Mark Whipple, he's predictable, he's this, he's that, he's not committed to the running game. I think the guy understands a good passing game, and I think he can design and draw up a good passing game, one that plays off things that happened earlier in the game, plays off things that the defense might have seen on film, plays off the defense's expectations of what Pitt's offense is going to do, and really kind of capitalizes on that. But some of those things are going to take some time to get open. Some of those things are going to take some time to develop, which means Kenny Pickett's got to hang in the pocket a little bit more. It can't just be 1, 2, 3, run. It might need to be 1, 2, 3, 4, throw. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, throw. Or run. If it's not open at that point. I think there are occasions where he needs to trust the protection a little bit better, where he needs to feel the pressure, not see it, but don't feel it until it's actually there. So that's not, that's something he's got to work on. He can run. He can make a lot of plays with his legs. But you know what? He's also missed some games. Each of the last 2 years, he's missed at least one game. He missed 2 last year, and he missed 1 in 2019. He missed the Delaware game. He probably could have played if it was a significant game, if it was a conference game. But the point stands. He's gotten knocked around a little bit. And so you also don't want to over-encourage him to run. You want him to go when the time is right, when the play is there to be made. But you want to be smart about it and be careful about it. Talkies Pitt says, I think Brennan Marion will take over as offensive coordinator. Maybe. I mean, he's here for, there's plenty of time for that to happen. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. You know what I mean? I don't think it's going to happen like this year or something like that. I think Brennan Marion is a young guy. He's a smart guy. He's an energetic guy. I think he's got a lot of ideas, and I think he's bringing a lot to the table. He has the potential to bring a lot to the table with Pitt's offense this year. But him being the offensive coordinator, I think is probably down the road a little bit. Kind of along those lines. Anthony Tennyson says, Brennan Marion said he was here to help out if he was asked to. Do you think Mark Whipple will incorporate some of his plays to spice it up a little bit? I think these coaches probably are a little more collaborative than we give them credit for or than we assume. They're all in a room together. They're all talking about a game plan. They're all working on putting together the playbook and the things they want to do. And, you hire guys not just to coach the position to be part of, but also to be part of planning the offense. You know what I mean? I think there is a collaborative process that happens here of, hey, we've got this one thing that we did here at Hampton or William & Mary or wherever, and we did this at Hawaii, and it was really good against this defensive look. I mean, I think it's inevitable that Brennan Marion's going to make those kind of contributions. Just like, Andre Powell has probably made those kinds of contributions. Like Dave Borbley has probably made those kinds of contributions. Like Tim Salem. You know what I mean? All these guys are working together to develop the best offense they can, and ultimately it's going to be Mark Whipple's call on the plays they take and what they do with them and when they run them. But I think it is collaborative. I think, so I think there will be input from Brennan Marion in this offense. I don't know if we'll be able to see it. We'll probably look at things and say, that's Brennan Marion, but, I think he'll have input for sure. All right, Colin Towell says, if the running game is mediocre again, Pitt won't be much better than last year. Can't leave points off the scoreboard in the red zone. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. And I mean, when you play as many close games as Pitt has played, games that they've won and games that they've lost, any time you settle for 3 instead of 7 is going to come back to bite you. And if you end up in a close game, those are the missed opportunities that leave you in that situation where you could lose it late or where you have to make a fourth quarter comeback to win. Those times when you settle for 3 instead of 7, or you tried to settle for 3 instead of 7 and you missed the field goal and you got 0 instead of 7. You can't have those. Not when you end up playing games as close as Pitt plays them. Intentionally otherwise. Pitt ends up in a lot of close games, and they have since Pat Narduzzi got here. You can't have a bad red zone offense, or you can't have a red zone offense that fails to score touchdowns consistently if that's how you're going to play games. But then again, maybe if they were better in the red zone, scored more touchdowns in the red zone, maybe they wouldn't be in so many close games, right? Maybe that's the difference. Royce Beacom says, should you bring up Kenny's backup situation, particularly in light of the injuries this year, or in light of his injuries each year? That is how does Mark Whipple intend to maintain the Pickett offense or develop the traits of his backup? I think I understand your question, Royce. You talking about when we talked to Kenny? I am going to ask Kenny about his backup quarterbacks. Like, what do you think about Nick Patty? What does Nick Patty do well? What does Davis Bevel do well? What does, Joey Yellen, Nate Arnell? What do you see out of these guys? Because you're standing there at practice, you're watching film, you're studying with these guys. But, who stands out to you? What do you see? I mean, I think the offense by and large is the same with all of those guys. I'm sure there are different plays that Whipple would call for. I think Whipple would probably call different plays for Pickett than he would call for Davis Bevel or Nate Yarnell or Nick Patty or Joey Yellen. I think that's just natural. Some guys do things better than others. But on the whole, there is sort of a playbook and a game plan that you're developing with these 4 quarterbacks or 5, however many it is, each week. And you can't have a whole separate playbook depending on which quarterback is in there. There is going to be a lot of overlap. There might be some place he doesn't call for this guy, but he does for the other. But there's inevitably going to be, and they're going to have to be, a lot of overlap. Josh Newark says the games in September should allow plenty of time for the backup quarterbacks to get in. You would like to think so, Josh. That hasn't always been the case. You would like to think it can be there could be a lot of time for the backups, but it doesn't always seem to work out that way. Hopefully it will be. You hope for that, but you never know. George Mitchell says the play calling has to have more imagination in the red zone. They were way too predictable. I think part of that is due to being limited in what they could do. They couldn't rely on the running game. They were pretty one-dimensional then. It comes down to the pass. And when you're passing in the red zone, you are limited in what you can do. You might be predictable because the number of plays that you have available are it's fewer than what you would have had otherwise. So I think there might be some predictability in the red zone, but I think it is a product of being as one-dimensional as they have been in the last 2 years, particularly when that one dimension is the pass. You just can't keep defenses guessing as much when there's so few things you can actually do in those situations. Charles Tomarello says, Pitt football is upon us. Yes, sir. It is. Friday is the first day of training camp. It's finally here. And when you think about it this way, Friday, they start training camp through all of August, games through November, bowl game in December. You're talking about really right now this week is when it begins, and it doesn't end until like Christmas, or New Year's. But depending on if you're fortunate enough to go to the BBVA Compass Bowl, it doesn't end until January 11th or January 12th or something like that. So, you're talking about solid 4 months of college football, and it's all getting started here in a couple of days. Of course, I think you're going to get great insight into the 2021 Pitt football season on the Kenny Pickett Show, which you can hear right here on the YouTube.com, on the Panther-Lair.com YouTube channel. It's also on our Panther-Lair Show podcast feed, so make sure you subscribe to Panther-Lair.com on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you subscribe there so you never miss any of our videos, none of these live streams. You don't miss any of the Kenny Pickett Show every Wednesday, shooting for 10 a.m. It's probably what we're going for in case anything has to change. But every Wednesday morning, we're going to release it. A new episode with Kenny talking about some of the biggest topics facing the team, some of the biggest question marks. Once we get into the season, it'll be reviewing the last game, previewing the next game, talking about everything going on with Pitt, everything going on with the ACC, college football, whatever else comes up, whatever else is relevant, we're going to talk to Kenny about it right there on the Kenny Pickett Show. I'm really excited for this. We've gotten great feedback to the first episode that came out today, August 4th. You can find that on the on our Panther-Lair.com YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And look, we even got a little button right down there. Okay? You can subscribe to our channel. You just hit that button while you're watching the video. That's how easy it is. We make it for you. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you know what's going on at all times on the Panther-Lair.com YouTube. Thanks, everybody who jumped in on the live stream tonight. This is a lot of fun. As always, we'll be back next Wednesday night. This is our new night. We're going to do it on Wednesdays throughout the month of August. I think once the season starts, we'll get back. Once we get to September, second week of September, we'll go back to Tuesday nights. But every Wednesday night, 8:30, we'll be right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com for our live stream, and then podcasts throughout the week. So everybody who listens to the podcast during the week, we really appreciate you. Thank you for your support. Everybody who jumped in tonight, the Super Chatters, Andy and RJC, man, and everybody who jumped in with questions and comments and discussion. It's been fun. Next week, by the time we talk next week, Pitt's going to have like 4 or 5 practices under their belt. 2021 college football season is here, folks. So let's see what your Pitt Panthers can do, right? Stay tuned to the website, of course, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting. Find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. If you like this podcast, you like getting involved in the live stream, you like having the conversations, go to the Panther-Lair.com message boards where we're having these kind of conversations all day, every day. Follow us on Twitter at Panther-Lair, Pantherlair. I think that's all the things I have to tell you. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, go to the website, and follow on Twitter because sometimes we post silly things there. I think that's it. All right. Thanks again to everybody who jumped in tonight and got in the conversation. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next Wednesday night, and we'll have some Pitt football to talk. See ya.